going on YouTube? It's your boy Spanko, and today I have another deck profile. Happy Monday, guys, and today's video is actually a video that I kind of touched on last week, and that is Yosenju Kaiju. So last week I did a going first Yosenju build. This week I'm actually going to be doing a Yosenju Kaiju build focused on going second. I think this is the one that I prefer out of the two. Now obviously if you guys like to go first and like to set up control decks, check out that video. That video is really good in that sense. However, I've been a big fan of Yosenjus and Kaijus. The synergy between them is just so good. So I really wanted to play this build. I wanted to showcase it off to you guys. Now on my decks I go through testing, so if you guys want to see videos of me doing those decks and putting them in action, let me know in the comment section down below. Also make sure to subscribe to the channel as well as hit that notification bell. It's very important because I see a lot of people are not actually viewing my videos, and like 80-something% of you guys are actually just not subscribed to the channel. So most of my viewers are actually not subscribed to the channel, which is freaking whack, bro. You guys either gotta hit that subscribe button or my subscribers are not seeing my videos. So the best thing you guys can do is make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, and if you guys can do that, it would mean the world. So I appreciate you guys, and now off to the deck profile. Okay, so for the deck profile, I'm sure you guys have seen the other Yosenju build that I did, but if you guys haven't, I definitely recommend checking it out. But in this build, I just wanted to explain something because I got a lot of comments in the other build just about why I don't play the other new Yosenju support monsters, stuff like Izna, stuff like, I forget the other names, but you know, the newer Yosenju monsters. I'm just going to explain that real quick. So first things first, I'm playing triple comma 1, triple comma 2, triple comma 3, as well as double Sujik, and this is a lineup that I am very firm on, and I very much stand by this lineup. Now, the reason why I don't play Izna is because when I look to build these rogue decks, because you guys have to keep in mind that Yosenju is not a meta deck, right? It is a rogue deck, and I'm just trying to build it to be as competitive as possible for today's metagame, right? So with that in mind, you really want to look for two things when building rogue decks like this. You want to look for cards that help advance your game state or help you win the game. And by win the game, I mean get your opponent's life points down to 0, because that's really how these rogue decks are built, right? It's not like setting up big like, oh, here's 6 negates, can you break my board, right? It's not like that. You really need to be able to attack your opponent and then just beat them when they don't see it coming. So that's the two things you really want to look for. Now Izna is really cool because Izna does get you a draw. However, unless that draw is impactful, it doesn't really do much else for you, because I'm sure you guys know, outside of their own unique effects, the Yosenju commas all have the same effect where when they're summoned, you can normal summon another Yosenju from your hand. So that's kind of how you spam the board. So comma 1 gets a bounce for you, and that's really important in the Kaiju build because you can bounce back your own Kaijus, right? So comma 1 is very good in that sense. Comma 2 is really good because it's an 1800 beater, 1900 if you have the Tenki on the board, the biggest Yosenju for you, right? Comma 3 is a +1 because when you do damage, you can search a card. So that's why you really want to play these cards, because these are the ones that do something for you, whereas something like Izna is kind of like, okay, now I'm kind of relying on what I draw. If I draw good, cool, but like if I don't draw good, then what does it do for me, right? It also doesn't get me an extra normal summon, and like if it did, I would 100% play the Izna, right? But because it doesn't, it's like, okay, you can summon it and then what, right? Sujik, you guys might be saying, okay, but Sujik doesn't get you an extra summon. The thing is, Sujik gets you 1000 attack points on any one of your Yosenjus, which relatively are pretty low attack point monsters, right? So with this low attack point, Sujik is really good as the last monster you summon. So let's say you open one of each comma, let's say in a Sujik, you summon 1, activate its effect, summon 2, activate its effect, summon 3, activate its effect, and then summon the Sujik last. And then Sujik can boost your comma 2, for example, by 1000 points, and now it's at 2800. That's very considerable, right? It also kind of acts like a hand trap. You're not really going to be using it as a hand trap too often, but I'm just saying, like, it does that for you. So that's why these cards do two things that I mentioned earlier: advance your game state and help you win the game by getting your opponent's life points down to 0, right? That's pretty much what this deck does, and that's pretty much what these core Yosenju monsters do. The other ones and the new support are cool or whatever, but in a competitive standpoint, you really got to be thinking of those two things that I mentioned to be able to win games. So that's why I would only recommend playing the 3 commas as well as the double Sujik. And so yeah, that's just from a deck building standpoint. I just wanted to explain that to you guys because I really want you guys to get better as players too, right? Just because you can play Yosenjus doesn't necessarily mean you have to play every in-archetype card, right? Some of the most meta decks this game has ever seen didn't play its every in-archetype card. Think about it. Pendulum Magician didn't play every Pendulum Magician. You got Performer Pals when Performer Pals were meta, didn't play every Performer Pal monster. Even Zodiac, before all the hits, didn't play a lot of the Zoo monsters. They just really played like Rat Pier at 3, Barrage at 3, maybe even 2 Thoroughblade only. They didn't even play 3 Thoroughblade because they used to play 3 Whiptail as well. So it's kind of like one of those things where even the best decks in this game haven't played their entire like
archetype cards, right? Because not every archetype card is the best. So that's why, especially with these rogue decks, you guys have to be very picky with what you decide to play in it. So that's why I'm going to play these Yosenjus, and I would not recommend playing any of the other ones. Isna is, if you really wanted to play Isna, it's like maybe a one-off, but again, I don't think it's that good. And then obviously we are going to be playing the Kaijus. Kaijus are the heart and soul of this deck. I mean, outside of the Yosenjus, of course, but the Kaijus are really important because, like I mentioned earlier, Combo 1 synergizes with the Kaijus so well. So imagine being able to Gamma Seal your opponent. Once you Gamma Seal your opponent, you activate the Combo 1 effect to bounce it back to your hand, because it'll come back to your hand, which means you can Kaiju your opponent again. You can get double Kaiju. If you open Kaiju plus Combo 1, that's 2 Kaijus you pretty much opened. That's insane. So the synergy with this deck is super good in my opinion, and I really like the synergy, and so that's why you're playing the Kaijus. And again, I'm playing triple Gamma Seal because it's the smallest one, and then double Humongous just because it's the second smallest one. Doesn't really matter which Kaijus you really want to play. Like, you can really just play any Kaijus, but I like 5 Kaijus for sure. I wouldn't cut them to less than 5. I would definitely play 5 Kaijus, and so 3 and 2 is perfectly fine. I'm playing double Ash. Again, if you guys have been watching my channel recently, I'm a big fan of double Ash. I just think Ash is not as good this format, and like, I know it sounds funny, but Ash is actually not that great. So many decks can play through an Ash nowadays that I just don't want to max it out at 3. I think 2 is good. I really never want to see double Ash in my hand either, so that's why I'm only playing the 2. Then I'm playing triple Nibiru because, as we all know, decks nowadays in this format specifically is combo heavy. Every meta deck right now is a combo heavy deck for the most part, so you really want to be able to beat the meta. And so to be competitive, you have to pretty much play all these outside cards. So I should say this as well from a deck building standpoint, is the core stays the same. Everything else here changes depending on what the meta is, right? So right now, because a lot of the meta game is combo heavy and combo centric, you're playing like the Nibirus, you're playing the Gammas, you're playing the hand traps, right? But let's say there's a format where it's just a bunch of back row, then you just play a bunch of back row hate, right? So what changes in this deck is just all of these cards right over here, so you can play them and cater them towards the meta game. So Nibiru is very important. Gamma is also really good for that sense, but I should also say Gamma synergizes super well with the Yosenjus. So why does it synergize, you guys ask? Well, all the Yosenjus have this effect where at the end phase they come back to your hand, so they kind of act like spirit monsters. That's where Gamma is really good, because if you have no monsters on your side of the field, so let's say you're going second, you break your opponent's board, you do a bunch of damage, like whatever, like poke, whatever it is, and then after you do the damage, you're all going to come back to your hand. So that means you have an empty board for Gamma, and Gamma is always live then, right? So obviously there's a chance where you have a Nibiru on your side of the field, or the Gamma Seal, where, like, you know, if that ends up happening, obviously the Gamma is not live, but Gamma is really good with the Yosenjus themselves. Also, technically, if you ended up having a Kaiju and a Nibiru on your side of the field, which happens a lot in this deck, because you can Nibiru your opponent mid-combo, and then let's say their Nibiru token is just way too big or whatever, then you can just Kaiju the token, and then at that point you can use the Kaiju, if you have a second Kaiju, let's say, and summon it to your side of the field, plus the Nibiru to make a Lambda, and then that's how you get the Gamma live. But again, that doesn't happen like super often, but in those situations where it does, it's really good. Also keep in mind, I should say, with a Nibiru token, Combo 1 can still bounce it. Even though it can't go to hand because it's a token, it'll just leave the field. The rules allow you to bounce cards that are tokens, right? So that's why it's really cool, because even if the Nibiru token is huge, you just comma bounce it, right? So it's really good in that sense. And then next, because Calamities is so big this format and so relevant, I guess you could say, this format, we are playing triple Imperm as well as double Chalice. Now you guys have to keep in mind that Imperm doesn't have to necessarily be used on your turn. So if you open an Imperm, you don't necessarily have to like see your opponent activate a card effect. Let's say they normal summon like an Oviraptor. Let's say you're going against Dino, right? Let's say they normal summon an Oviraptor. You don't have to shotgun the Imperm. If you see where the combo is going and you're like, okay, they're going to end on this board, you can hold the Imperm until your turn. And then when your turn rolls around, you can use the Imperm to stop one of your opponent's monsters and then continue from there, right? So that's why I thought Imperm was really good, especially if they end on like a Dolka. That's just Dino. But like in the Calamities situation, for example, if your opponent ends on a Calamities, then you can just Imperm the Calamities on your turn. And you guys might be saying, okay, Spanko, they can just chain Calamities to Imperm. Well, of course, that's where kind of the gameplay and you as a player is where it comes to matter, right? Because if you see your opponent just shotgun Calamities in standby phase, then you can like activate your Imperm and negate the Calamities, right? You can do Chalice. Chalice is pretty much the same thing as Imperm in that sense, so Chalice does that as well for you. But then if you see your opponent doesn't activate the Calamities, that's where the Kaijus come in, because sometimes your opponent might be thinking, okay, I don't want to play into an Imperm, right? That's why this deck is so cool in my opinion, because your opponent might be thinking, okay, I don't want to play into an Imperm, so I'm going to wait till my opponent commits something to the board, and then I'm going to activate Calamity so that they don't have a chance to Imperm me. Well, two things. One, you still have the chance to Chalice them at that point, but two, if they don't activate the Calamities and they hold the Calamities, you have the Kaiju for the Calamities. Bro, like, that's why this deck synergizes so well with each other. Like, everything low-key just works so well with each other. So that's why I'm just playing these. Chalice, again, is pretty much the same reason for Imperm, just against the Calamities boards. And any boards in general, to be honest with you. If they make Savage boards, any kind of negates, Chalice is really good for that. And then just before we get into the next cards, I'm just gonna have to do something real quick. I just completely forgot to do something. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, we are playing triple pot of Extravagance. Again, you don't use the extra deck too much in this deck, so Extravagance is really good. Because, like, to be honest, do I have to explain this card? It's a +1. You don't use your extra deck too much. And if your opponent does have a hand trap or something, this is just going to bait it out, and then you can continue playing from there. So Extravagance is really good. Triple Lightning Storm. Now, I want to mention that this is a very budget deck. So if you guys can see the rest of the deck, of course, Imperm still has a little bit of value, but I know it just got reprinted in maximum gold, so I think it's gone down a little bit. I know Nibiru has got a maximum gold print as well, and it's pretty cheap. Extravagance got a mega pack reprint. So most of this deck, actually, funny enough, is pretty budget outside of Lightning Storm. Now, Lightning Storm is insane because it covers two things for you. One, it covers the back row matchups where you don't have a lot of back row removal here. You're very focused on the combo decks. So it gets rid of the back row stuff for you. But on top of that, what it does really well is that if your opponent has a bunch of monsters, obviously it clears their board. And it also baits out a negate if your opponent has negates, right? So Lightning Storm does so much for you, and it's so good. And it does, of course, like I said, the most important thing is it gets rid of the back row matchup for you. But if you guys don't have access to Lightning Storm, perfectly fine. Don't worry, I get it. Just in an optimal, in a perfect world, you would be playing Lightning Storm. If you don't have these, play triple evenly matched, so you can cut these out, play evenly matched instead, or you can cut these out and play the Harpy's Feather Duster plus the Cosmic Cyclones. That's just what I would recommend, to be honest with you. So either the triple Lightning Storm or the triple evenly matched, or a Harpy's Feather Duster plus double Cosmic Cyclone, all right? So that's how I want to say this is a very budget deck, okay? For the most part, it's a very budget deck outside of the Lightning Storm. So again, you can keep it budget though by playing the evenly matched, which I believe have gone down in price, a little bit more affordable, as well as the Cyclones and the Harpy's Feather Duster. So it's really up to you, whatever you have access to. This covers your back row matchups. This covers back row matchups as well, technically, but also covers monsters. Lastly, we're just playing triple Tenki, searches any one of your Yosenju monsters. No reason to not play Tenki. And then we're playing one double or nothing. Now, I just wanted to explain this as well. If you guys didn't want to play the one double or nothing, you guys can play the Slumber instead. So I should say that this could be double or nothing, or it could be Slumber, and I'm just going to explain both choices here, right? So I chose to go with double or nothing because sometimes you see situations when you're like, oh man, I'm really short on game. Like, this deck can make rank 4 so easily with all the Yosenju. So it's like, oh, I'm really short for game. Okay, let me just go and make the Utopia double, search double or nothing, and then go into Utopia and then try to beat my opponent that way. So that's why I thought double or nothing was going to be really good in this deck, and I think it's really like a really good option, to be honest with you, even though it's technically kind of a brick. However, if you don't want to play the double or nothing and you're not a fan of this, just play the Slumber instead. The only thing it changes is your extra deck, really. If you don't play the double or nothing and you play the Slumber, obviously you wouldn't want to be playing Utopia and Utopia double. You'd just be playing stuff like Gaga Cowboy. I 100% recommend Cowboy. If you guys don't play the double or nothing and you guys choose to play the Slumber instead, I 100% recommend the Gaga Cowboy. I also recommend Utopia still, but I would also play Utopia the Lightning. And then you could play rank 8 monsters. You can just play more link 2 monsters, whatever you guys want to do. Just as long as you just change this out, you just have to change these monsters out. That's all that changes in the deck. It's really good still, Slumber, because Slumber technically gets you a search if it's in the graveyard. Also, it baits out a negate if your opponent has negates on the board and you don't have any Kaijus in hand. It does bait out a negate. I should also mention that if you don't have Lightning Storm, I would recommend playing this, because at least this way it kind of is a pseudo Lightning Storm where it's like, okay, I'm playing the back removal, but this also gets rid of my opponent's monsters, right? So it's really up to you. So if you wanted to play double or nothing, keep it this way. If you don't play double or nothing, the only thing you change is put this in and then just change the rank 4s that you really play. That's really all that changes. And then speaking of the extra deck, I am playing double Starving Venom as well as one Mud Dragon. Now I'm going to explain this. You guys don't see a side deck here, right? Or not a real side deck, at least. These are just other options. But in the side deck, I 100% recommend playing Super Poly, because I think Super Poly is really good this format against a lot of decks. So you can just play these as your Super Poly targets. One Draco Berserker as well as one Omega. This is obviously for the Gamma. And these are just 2 of the best level 8 synchros to go into, so that's why I'm playing this, because if you do end up using Gamma on your turn, then these cards are obviously really good to go into, the Omega as well as the Draco Berserker. Then I'm playing Triple Utopia as well as Triple Utopia the double. This is for the Extravagance, because, you know, you still want to play these if you're playing the double or nothing. But again, like I said, just change these out. If you're not playing double or nothing, play other rank 4 monsters, play other rank 2 monsters, whatever you guys want to do. But I 100% recommend Cowboy for sure, and then Utopia and Utopia Lightning is a pretty good option as well for you, right? The only reason you don't go into to the extra deck too much, I should mention, is because you have no way to really recycle your Yosenju monsters. So once they go to the graveyard, you're kind of stuck with them in the graveyard. So that's why I don't like going to the extra deck too much. But it's just one of those situations, and you see those like times when you're like, okay, wait, I can go for game here, but I just need that one extra push. So that's why the double or nothing is in there. But technically, if you're really close for game anyways, you can just go into Cowboy as well and use Cowboy for game. Still a very real thing. So that's why you have so many options when it comes to this last card, whether it's double or nothing or it's Slumber, and then you could change up the extra deck accordingly. I'm playing double Boral Sword. To be honest with you, I think it came up one time where I used Gamma on my opponent. I think on his turn, he activated Calamities, and I just chained Gamma or something like that. And then I got 2 of these on the board. And then I think I summoned a couple of Yosenjus and made Boral Sword, and then I don't know, I think I ended up winning the game that way. So I think just Boral Sword is just an option for you. You don't have to play this either. Lambda I would recommend playing though, because again, like I explained earlier, those random situations where you have Nibiru and Gamma Seal on the board, or like Nibiru and Humongous on the board, let's say, and then you have a Gamma in hand, you're like, okay, well, these 2 won't do too much for me, might as well go into the Lambda. Because even though you guys might be thinking, oh, they're 2 big bodies, it's like, okay, but then your opponent can just beat over them or pop them or do something and then just continue playing. That's why I thought Gamma and Lambda was really important, right? So this is the only one I really go into outside of the Synchros and these 2, and then once in a while I'll go into these, to be completely honest with you. So the extra deck is really whatever up to your liking, like whatever you guys choose to play is perfectly fine. The only difference again that changes is whether you play the double or nothing or not. But that's it pretty much for the deck profile. I think this is a really competitive build of Yosenju. I think it's one of the better builds, and the synergy between all these cards, you guys just saw all the explanation. The synergy is so good between everything.
So that's it for the deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed. You guys can see that I went in depth with this profile, explained a lot of what the Yosenjus can do, a lot of how they synergize super well with the Kaijus. One of my favorite decks of all time. Now I know we might not be saying, oh guys, it's like tier 1 meta deck, but I'm telling you, this is a rogue deck that you guys can actually surprise a lot of your competitors and opponents with. So you guys can try it out and let me know what your results are like. But again, as always, if you guys enjoyed, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. I got nothing left to say, so with that, Spanko signing out. Wait, I should say actually that if you guys have any suggestions, let me know in the comment section down below. And then all my links are also going to be in the description, so you guys can check that out. And I mean, that's all I gotta say, so Spanko signing out, peace!
My hands steady, I feel ready, but my legs heavy, I don't get it. How come I haven't hit it already? Still working, I'm still learning, I'm still searching, finally earning something, finally turning something called a profit. If I hear you talking shit, don't get caught in it. I'll be popping off and hit your ass, dropping all your shit. Yeah, I promise this, I got promises, you ain't stopping this. Cross my shit.